All right, today's gospel reading is going to be from Luke chapter 13, verses 10 through 17. And as always, I'll be doing the explanation according to the Blessed Theophylact, who is an archbishop from the Ohrid region of Bulgaria from the 11th century. And he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And behold, there was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bent over, and could in no wise straighten herself. And when Jesus saw her, he called her to him, and said unto her, Woman, thou art loosed from thy infirmity. And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight, and glorified God. And the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation, because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath day, and said unto the people, There are 6 days in which men ought to work. In them, therefore, come and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day. The Lord then answered him and said, Thou hypocrite, doth not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or ass from the stall, and lead it away to watering? And ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan hath bound low these 18 years, be loosed from this pond on the Sabbath day? And when he had said these things, all his adversaries were ashamed, and all the people rejoiced for all the glorious things that were done by him. And the explanation here, the woman suffered from this affliction as a result of demonic assault. As the Lord himself says, this woman whom Satan hath bound low these 18 years. Perhaps God had departed from her on account of certain sins, and as a result, Satan was punishing her. For Satan is, in part, the cause of all the hardships which afflict our bodies, when God on high permits him. From the very beginning, it was Satan who was brought about our fall, by which we lost the incorruptibility in which we had been created. It was Satan who caused us to be bound to diseased bodies prone to suffering, symbolized by the garments of dead skins in which Adam and Eve were wrapped in Genesis 3:22. But now the Lord, with the majestic voice of the Godhead, full of power, drives out the infirmity of this woman. He places his hands on her so that we might learn that his holy flesh imparted both the power and the energy of the Logos. For his flesh was his own, and not that of some other human person alongside him, separate from him in hypostasis, as the impious Nestorius thinks. The heretic Nestorius, who was the patriarch of Constantinople from 428 to 431 AD, taught that the co-originate Logo was not conceived and did not take flesh in the Virgin's womb, but instead was united to Christ the man at some time later. This implied that the two natures of Christ, the divine and the human, were not united in one hypostasis, that is, in one person, but in two, and therefore were not truly united. If this were so, Christ would not have accomplished the salvation of the human race. As a result, Nestorius called the Virgin Mary Christotokos, that is, the birth giver of Christ, but refused to call her the Theotokos, the birth giver of God. This false teaching was condemned as heresy at the Third Ecumenical Council held in Ephesus in the year 431, and from that time Nestorius and all who follow his teaching have been outside of the church. So great is the goodness of the Lord, who in this manner took mercy on his own creation. But Satan, who had bound the woman in the first place, was vexed at her deliverance, because he desired her continual affliction. And he bound the ruler of the synagogue with spite, and through the mouth of this man Satan reviled the miracle. This is how he always attacks the good. Therefore the Lord uses the apt example of irrational animals to rebuke the man who was indignant that a healing had taken place on the Sabbath. And thus, not only this man, but all the other adversaries of Jesus as well, were put to shame by Christ's words. For it was insane to hinder the healing of a man on the Sabbath, using as a pretext the commandment that the Sabbath day be a day of rest. So it was that even while the people were rejoicing at the Lord's deeds, his adversaries were put to shame by his words. For these adversaries, rather than joining in the jubilation which followed his work of healing, instead burned with rage that he had healed at all. But the multitude, because they derived benefit from his signs, rejoiced and took pleasure in this healing. You must also understand these miracles refer to the inner man. The soul is bent over in infirmity, whenever it inclines to earthly thoughts alone and imagines nothing that is heavenly and divine. It can truly be said that this soul has been an infirm for 18 years. For when a man is feeble in keeping the commandments of the divine law, which are 10 in number, and is weak in his hope of the 8th age, the age to come, it can be said that he has been bent over for 10 and 8 years. The Greek text of the gospel expresses the number of years in this fashion: 10 and 8 years. Is not that man indeed bent over who is attached to the earth, and who always sins in disregard of the commandments, and who does not look for the age to come? But the Lord heals such a soul on the Sabbath in the assembly of the synagogue. For when a man assembles together within himself thoughts of confession, Judah means confession, and keeps the Sabbath, that is, he rests from doing evil, then Jesus heals him, not only by his word when he says to him, Thou art loose from thine infirmity, but also by deed. For when he has placed his hands on us, he requires that we accept the energy from his divine hands to do in collaboration with him the works of virtue. We must not be satisfied to receive only that healing which comes by word and by instruction.